There is a study of just over 90,000 people followed for around 20 years, and the ones eating a small handful of walnuts 5 or more times a week were about 14% less likely to have died by the end of that period than the people who ate no walnuts at all. And walnuts are one of the very few individual foods where a finding like that keeps showing up, and where we've also got a proper trial backing it up, rather than just a survey of what people say they eat. So here's how we're going to go through this in today's video. We're going to start with the big study behind that number. Then we're going to talk about the trial where researchers actually handed people the nuts and then counted heart attacks and strokes. Then we're going to talk about what walnuts are doing inside your blood vessels once you've eaten them. And then finally, what all of this looks like in a normal week, including how much to have and how to store them so they don't go off. Hello to all of you watching this video. My name's Dr. Alex, and I want to tell you about something before we begin, because I have launched a daily newsletter that I think many of you would enjoy reading and actually learn a lot from. It's basically just an extension of this YouTube channel. It is a short email from me, written by me every single morning when I'm at the breakfast table drinking my coffee, and it might be a tip or piece of research I found interesting, or simply whatever's on my mind, anything that I think you will find useful. It will take you well under a couple of minutes to read, around 30 seconds or 60 seconds. It's completely free to join, and an awful lot of you actually already have joined. So the link is in pinned comment of this video and in the description as well. But you can just go to dralexnewsletter.com and pop your email in there. I really hope you find it useful. So the first thing to talk about is where that 14% figure actually comes from, because the study behind it is a really big one, and it is really worth spending some time to go through this properly. So it used 2 long-running American research projects. The first one was the Nurses' Health Study and also the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, and you can read these in the description below. There were 67,000 women and 26,000 men, so a bit over 90,000 people in total, and all of them were free from cancer and heart disease and strokes when they joined. So these were fairly, healthy people. Their diets were reassessed every 4 years rather than just asked about once and then forgotten, which is a real strength for a study like this. And the researchers also recorded who died over the following 2 decades and what they died of. And in a group of this size, almost 100,000 people, made up largely of people already in their 60s at the start of the study, you would expect a great many deaths simply from age and ordinary illness over the 20 years. And that is what happened, with just over 30,000 deaths recorded from all of the usual causes. So the point I'm making is that these people didn't die because they ate walnuts. Obviously, I'm not saying that. When the researchers then lined people up by how many walnuts they were eating, and the serving here means around 28g, so like an ounce or roughly 7 whole walnuts, the pattern moved in pretty clear steps. Compared with people who ate 0 walnuts, so literally none at all, those having less than 1 serving a week had around 5% lower death rates. 1 serving a week had about 6%, 2 to 4 servings around 13% lower, and 5 or more servings around 14%. Deaths from heart disease and stroke were down by roughly a quarter in that top group. It is enormous. And when they modelled this out, a 60-year-old eating walnuts that often could expect around 1.3 extra years of life. Now, it is completely fair to say that somebody eating walnuts 5 times a week is probably doing other healthy things alongside it. Of course they are. And of course, it will be playing a big part in the findings here. But the thing is, walnuts really do carry a long list of good things in their own right, which we're going to come on to. So this may well be more than just healthy people being healthy, if that makes sense. The next thing to look at is my favorite research study, the Spanish study called Pre-Dimed. I think I've mentioned it about 1,000 times over the last few months. So this is where people were put into groups by chance, completely randomly, and then given their food directly, rather than researchers simply watching what they chose to eat. They recruited around 7,500 people aged between 55 and 80 who were at high risk of heart disease but hadn't yet had a heart attack or a stroke, and they split them 3 ways. One group got a Mediterranean diet plus about a litre a week of extra virgin olive oil. One group got a Mediterranean diet plus around 30 cartons of mixed nuts a day, and half of that was walnuts, also with almonds and hazelnuts as well. and the third group was simply advised to cut down on fat, which was the standard advice at the time, just a basic low-fat diet. And the reason why that's significant is because it is the opposite of a diet full of olive oil and nuts as well, because nuts contain fat and olive oil is a fat as well, obviously. And the point is that, we were told that fat is the enemy, and this is what it was testing. Now, what they counted in this trial, it wasn't a blood result that they were tracking. It was heart events, so heart attacks and strokes and deaths from heart disease, all reviewed by this committee in this study. After a median of just under 5 years, the nut group had roughly a 28% lower rate of those events than the group given the low-fat advice. Now, a big part of that will have come from the overall eating pattern, since both Mediterranean groups did pretty well, and there wasn't much between them on the headline result. But the researchers also looked at how many nuts people were actually getting through. And the participants in the nut group who ate more than 3 servings a week had the lowest death rate of anybody in the entire trial, around 60% lower than those eating no nuts at all. 60%. So basically, the more nuts people actually ate, the better they did, which does suggest there's something protective in the nuts themselves rather than in the diet around them. The third thing worth understanding here is what is actually going on inside you when you consume a walnut, because it helps to explain why these results keep repeating and why people like me keep making videos like this. So, a walnut is roughly 2/3 fat by weight, and the type of fat is what makes this unusual, since walnuts are the only common nut with a large amount of alpha-linoleic acid, which is a plant form of omega-3, the same family of fats that we talked about with oily fish. Alongside that, you obviously get fiber, which is incredibly good for you. You get magnesium and also a big dose of polyphenols, which are plant compounds that reduce damage in the lining of your blood vessels. Now, the number a lot of this comes back to is LDL cholesterol. Now, LDL is the particle that carries cholesterol around your bloodstream, and when there's a lot of it circulating, some of it works its way into your artery wall and builds up slowly over years. The trial that tested this particular thing was called WAHA, so WAHA. It took 780 healthy adults aged 63 to 79 in Barcelona and California, and it randomly assigned them either to eat walnuts every day for 2 full years or none at all. In the walnut group, total cholesterol, despite the amount of fat they were eating because of the amount of fat in these nuts, their total cholesterol fell by around 8.5 milligrams per deciliter, which is about 0.22 in the millimoles per litre that we use in the UK. And LDL fell by roughly 4 milligrams per deciliter, so around 0.11. The number of small, dense LDL particles, which are the ones that slip into the artery wall quite easily, this dropped by about 6%, and that held true for 2 entire years in people whose cholesterol was already fairly normal to begin with, without any extra weight gain despite the extra calories every single day from the walnuts. For a single food eaten by the handful, that is a lot of work for a walnut to be doing. It is a really powerful food. Now, the last thing to talk about in this video is the practical side of all of this. How much do you eat? How do you get it into your diet? All that sort of stuff. And I would rather explain why the amount is what it is before giving you a number. So nearly every study that we've discussed landed on about 30 gman a day, which is roughly 7 whole walnuts or an ounce or a small handful that doesn't quite fill your palm. So that's the amount worth aiming for. The thing to keep an eye on is what happens around them, because 30 gin comes in at around 200 calories, and if you simply just add that on top of everything you already eat, you've changed your diet in a direction that I guess you didn't really intend. So it works far better as a swap, a substitute. So think of your mid-morning afternoon biscuits or the cereal bar, both of which are obviously ultra-processed. And the point is that you're taking out something that isn't doing you any favors and then putting something in that genuinely is. In terms of getting them into your diet, they go really well stirred through some porridge or some yogurt or scattered over a salad, which is what we do quite regularly, or just chopped up really small and put into a bolognese or a pasta dish, where barely anybody will notice them anyway. Now, there are a couple of things worth knowing about when you buy walnuts, because honey roasted walnuts or any sort of nut with a sweet coating or like toffee on them or anything like that. You know, these are basically a dessert or a confectionery rather than a health food. So plain ones, you know, unflavored, they're the ones that you're after. And since walnuts are so high in that omega-3 fat, you know, they tend to turn a bit rancid, you know, a bit faster than other nuts do, and they taste a bit sharp and a bit bitter once they've gone off, which is why I would just keep a big bag in the freezer or the fridge rather than in a warm cupboard where you would normally keep your regular salted peanuts. So there we go, the power of walnuts. I hope you're going to get some the next time you go to a shop. And see how you get on. They're not the tastiest nuts, I'll give you that. But once you get into a routine and incorporating them into the foods that you're making, you know, this is a habit that is super easy to stick to. I really hope that has been useful for you. Every study that I've mentioned is linked in the description, so go and read them and let me know what you think. And then finally, just one really important point, food and the things that I talk about on this channel is for lowering your risk over years. It is not a substitute for getting looked at or examined or checked out for whatever you're concerned about. So if you've got symptoms that are persistent or unusual or severe or anything, just please don't sit on those symptoms and hope they settle down. Book in with your doctor, go and get some personal medical advice, you know, go and book an appointment now and do things properly. Please don't listen to me over your own doctor regarding anything personal that you can experience that, you know, I can't examine, if that makes sense. You know, all of this is just general education. It is not personal medical advice. For something like walnuts, you're not going to have any problems. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.